Hello everyone, welcome back to another Blender 3D exercise. In today's exercise we're going to be making a plant using the array modifier, and this is actually an exercise that I borrowed from a guy that taught me Blender, and so I'm going to post a link to the video from him in the description, so please be sure to check out his channel and show him some love as well. Guy's really phenomenal, and he actually takes it a lot further than we're going to take it. I'm just kind of using this as a base example because I think it's a really great example of how powerful the array modifier can be, but he does some other stuff that we're not going to go into, so definitely check out his channel as well. Okay, and so to get started, we're going to make the stem, and so to do that, we're going to get rid of this, and we're going to add a cylinder. And so we're going to go into edit mode, and we're going to move this up to where the bottom of the cylinder is on the XY plane. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to scale and use Shift Z just to make it skinnier. Maybe again, just fine tune it. Okay. And so now I'm going to go into working with faces, grab the top, and I'm going to toggle orthographic for this because it's starting to get long. But I'm going to grab the top and just kind of scale it up. Oops, don't want to do that. About like that. That's perfect. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab the top of this. We're going to bevel it. We're going to open this up and change this to 3. And so now we're going to grab the top face of this and turn on proportional editing. We're going to scale that way down. Because what we want to do is we want to make the bevel kind of extended to get kind of a plant tip shape. Okay, so that's good. And so now I'm going to use Control R to add some loop cuts just to kind of give this a little more geometry. And then also I'm going to preemptively, if I can find one. It gets really hard to work with these things when they get long. Okay. And kind of push that down towards the bottom. And that's just preemptive for when we add our modifiers. So I'm going to select the tip of this again. And with proportional editing on, I'm going to scale it up, or scale down and move the proportional editing up. And this is just to kind of make the top of our plant stem, and make sure to do Shift Z because you don't want your plant stem to get shorter as you do this. This is just to make the top of our plant a little bit narrower than the bottom, to give us a more organic shape. Alright. So we're going to add a subdivision surface modifier. So yeah, that should do for our plant stem. Make sure to rename it plant stem. It's no longer a cylinder. And so now we're going to work on the leaves. And for that, I recommend a couple of things. Number one, going into overhead view. Because since that stem is really long, it can be kind of a pain in the neck to work with. And so the next thing, we're going to add a circle. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this down. You can scale it pretty small. And now I'm going to grab this and move it along the x-axis. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make this a little more leaf-shaped. And so to do that, we're going to switch working to vertices, and we're going to grab the front and change our proportional editing to sharp. Then we're going to grab and way shrink our proportional editing, and clamp to the x-axis. Make that a little bit more like a leaf. So now we're going to select the other end and move this to linear and scale it down a little bit. And there we go. Okay, so now let's go ahead and fill in this. And to do that, we're going to start by selecting these two and use F to join. And then same thing with that. We're going to switch to working with edges and join these into a face, and then just select the front edge and start hitting F. Make sure to stop before you get to the tip. If you go to the tip, you've gone too far, and just use Control Z to back up. And once you get it working like this, or looking like this rather, go ahead and select all these inner lines, and right click and subdivide. And we're going to subdivide quite a bit. We're going to subdivide 5 times. We want quite a bit of geometry. And so we're going to treat the front and back of this a little bit different. And so we'll start with the front. Oops. There's what I wanted to do. Okay, so starting with this one, don't worry about these because they already have a line. You're going to make lines between each point and the tip. And you may be thinking, okay, well, why don't I just do this? Well, if you do that, you notice, and if I switch to face mode, it made a single face out of all of these, so it didn't do what you expect. So I know this is a little tedious, but unfortunately you have to do it one at a time. Alright, and so now switch into edge mode, and just like with the points, grab the 2 edges on each face and make an individual face. And so you may be thinking, okay, well, why don't you use the F trick where you just do FFFF a bunch of times? Well, since you've got many points here and 1 point here, it doesn't really do that correctly. Like you see, it kind of made it to here, and I'm going to undo because I think it actually made a face. And you also may be thinking, okay, well, why don't you select multiple? Well, this is the same problem as the vertices. So if I hit F, everything looks okay. But if I go to face selection and try to select this, you notice it treats this as one face. So unfortunately, once again, you have to do this individually. Luckily, there's not too much geometry here, and so wasn't too bad. Okay, and so for this side, we're going to do close to the same thing, but we're going to change things up at the end. And so same thing as before, make our lines. But instead of closing these out with faces, we actually need more geometry down at the tip for making the stem. And so we're going to do a Shift V, which if you remember is an edge slide. You don't want to do that. If it starts looking wonky, hit Escape and start over. You want to kind of try to make it go straight if you can. And get pretty close to the tip, but don't try to go all the way to the tip. The closer you get to the tip, the greater the chance it's going to look wonky. So about there is perfect. And if you want to, you can even add an additional edge loop here, just to get back some of the geometry you kind of lost by stretching this down. But once you get that looking good, just select the tip and remove it. Okay, and so now you've got a point for your stem. And so before we make the stem, what we're going to do is we're going to do Shift Z, and we'll fix the top of that in a sec. To go into wireframe, we're going to grab these and go E, X, and then just use Shift R a few times. And make sure you don't go over the origin. If you go over the origin, it's going to mess up when you start trying to do the array. Part of what we're going to do is revolve. So you want to get it close, but not necessarily overlap. And the next thing you can do is with your proportional editing typeset to smooth, scale the stem down a little bit. So make it kind of get skinnier as it gets closer to the origin. And there we go. So now I'm going to switch back off of wireframe. We're going to exit edit mode on that, and we're going to fix this real quick. We're just going to do a Control B. There we go. Fixed. I mean, it's maybe a little bit more of a bevel. We do want this to be more of a rounded edge, not flat. How does that look? Much better. Okay, so now select your leaf and let's go back into edit mode. And so we've got the basic shape of a leaf, but there's still a couple of problems. So number one, if we go to front view and kind of actually focus on the leaf, you'll notice it's all right down at the XY plane, which is what we expected. That's where the original circle was. But, we kind of want the leaf to be off the ground. Typically, leaves aren't on the ground. And so for this, what we're going to do is we're going to select our leaf. And with proportional editing on, we're going to do GZ. You can just leave it on smooth. And kind of drag the stem up. And now RY. Just a little bit. And we're going to fix the rest of the leaf in a sec. Right now, we're just trying to get to where it kind of looks like a stem. So that looks good. Okay. So, for the next bit, we are going to use Alt left click to select the middle. And with proportional editing on, we're going to go down. And you can make this pretty stark. Oh, and it might help. For this, you're going to want the linear, not the smooth. And it takes a little bit of finessing, so you don't want too much. Maybe like that. Move that back up. Okay. And now you're going to select the outside. And now we're going to, and those you do want smooth. So switch back to smooth, grab the outside. And you can move this down a little bit. So we just want the outer edges to fold down just a little bit. Give it more of a leaf look. A little bit more. Yeah. And so now the last thing, just select that tip. Or actually, I think instead of the tip, let's do the opposite. So let's select the thickest part of the leaf. And with proportional editing on, make it kind of big. And there we go. Okay. Maybe move it up just a tad. Get it off the ground. Okay. So now we've got our basic leaf shape. And if we shade smooth, it looks a little better. Now, if you want a sharp crease, you can do our Control R trick. And this should give us a little bit sharper of a crease in the center. See? And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some modifiers to really, really bring this thing home. And so the first modifier we're going to add is one we talked about in our examples, and it is the Solidify. And we can pop that up. No, that's too much. Alright, and so now you notice this gives it a little bit of volume. And so the next thing we're going to add, we can go ahead and reduce this now, or minimize that, is a subdivision surface. Pop that up to 2 levels. And so now you notice this is looking really, really nice. Like this actually looks like a leaf now. And so, actually, let's make this a little bit bigger. Yeah, okay. So now we're all set with that. Now before we add our array modifier, we are going to do our, make sure that this, very important, make sure that this is not overlapping the origin, which it is. So we're going to move this forward just a little bit. Like I said, this is really imperative for this next part. Okay, so now that we've got that in place, we're going to go ahead and rename this leaf because it's no longer a circle. And now we are going to add an empty. And I like to use the sphere, but you can use whichever one you prefer. And I'm going to name this leaf controller. Alright, and so I'm now going to add an array modifier. I'm going to turn off relative offset and turn on object, and I'm going to add a leaf controller. And so now, oh, and we also need to increase the number, so let's pop that up to 25. We want a lot of leaves. Okay, so now we are going to rotate around the z-axis. And actually, I think it works better if you scale first, so, or grab, excuse me. So I'm going to grab and move up. Now R around the z-axis. And we are just going to rotate until it actually looks good. So again, this is graphics, so when it looks good, that's when you're done. And now we're going to scale. And GZ. Move these back up to the tip. Okay. And voila. Just like that, you have a plant. And so right now, it looks a little unnatural because this is super straight. And normally plants have a little bit of a curve to it, and we will definitely revisit this when we go over curves to kind of give it a little bit more of an organic twist. But for now, this is done. So go ahead and save, and you can just call it plant. You can see I already have one from a previous lesson, but I'll go ahead and overwrite it. And that's it. So as always, I hope you enjoyed the exercise. If you did, please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next exercise.